Hello, Sooner Nation. OU Inside in OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who can't talk no good, because that's me. Apparently, I didn't realize that till today. Breaking news on this podcast: I can't talk good. So, if you can't talk good, this is the Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I'm joined by someone who can talk goodly, and that's Brian Clinton. Brian, how good can you talk? Can you talk better than I can? God, it was awful.
I can talk good. I can put words together sometimes. We like the track.
I'm annoyed because I actually had the intro planned today, and I was gonna say for the third thing, I was gonna say people who are annoyed about having to wake up early and drive to Ardmore, because that's me. And there's probably not very many people in that boat, but that's me, because tomorrow morning I'm driving to Ardmore, Oklahoma for the OU Board of Regents meeting. And unfortunately can't get into a ton of it here today, Brian, because the meeting hasn't happened yet, because time is linear. Or it isn't linear? It is linear. I don't
I've never
I,
understood that. Yeah, I don't know what that means. My words aren't good for that.
it is or it isn't linear. At least we experience it linearly,
Yes,
and
time is linear from our perspective.
from our perspective, it's linear.
Yeah.
So can't talk about it because it hasn't happened yet. But Brian, I think it is just noteworthy, even for people who listen to this after the fact, which you should go to ouinsider.com tomorrow, because I will have a story from the meeting, as well as we will have availability with Joe Castiglione tomorrow after the meeting, and that interview will be up on ouinsider.com and our OU Insider YouTube channel. I think it's pretty interesting, Brian. Just a couple of things to note, just even so that people are aware of it. A lot of contracts that are being talked about tomorrow, presumably being extended or adjusted compensation wise in some respect. It's pretty interesting because, I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, Jenny Baranchek's contract's getting looked at. A lot of the basketball assistants are getting looked at. But I think it's interesting from a football perspective because Miguel Chavis is getting looked at. DeMarco Murray is getting looked at. And Curtis Lofton is getting looked at because I think he's becoming officially the general manager.
Yeah.
So he's getting a salary bump. And
Which we
it is
know that
interesting.
number at this point, right?
It's 300,000
300K. That's what I
from
thought.
100 from 150 to 300,000.
Yeah.
And but it's for the assistant's point of view, it's interesting because DeMarco and Miguel Chavis, I believe, have already had their contracts adjusted this offseason.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be interested to see how those contracts, how are they further adjusted. But I think the main thing is two coaches' contracts are being looked at tomorrow, and that is Brent Venables and Porter Moser. So the Brent Venables we knew was coming because at the last Board of Regents meeting in February, whatever month that was, I was there. Time not only is linear, I don't remember so good. They looked at a lot of the assistant contracts, and Joe Castiglione mentioned they were going to look at Brent Venables' contract at a later date. So we knew it was coming. The Porter Moser one is pretty interesting. Pretty interesting to see. Unfortunately, we won't know some of those specific details until we get to the meeting, exactly what they're doing. But I'm assuming Brent Venables is getting a contract extension and probably a pay raise. Noteworthy that OU joins the SEC in 10 days, 11 days, 11 days.
Wow.
So that, but also Porter Moser is getting his contract looked at. So if you want to know all the deets about that, go to ouinsider.com, because I'm going to be working hard driving to Ardmore. So please make it worth my while for me to drive to Ardmore.
If it makes you feel any better with 7:11 a.m. kicks last year, there were several times I was on the road by 4:30, 5 o'clock, just to make sure I beat game day traffic to get down to you in Norman. So I feel that. That's not fun
Well, the difference is, Brian, is that happened to
during the game.
you?
Yeah.
That happened to you. and this is happening to me.
So it's not relevant, right?
Yeah,
Okay, now I
so
get it. Okay.
I don't really care if unless it happens to me. Um, the other thing is, I think you're more of a morning person than I am. I wake up at like 9 a.m., 9:30 most days, and I'm proud of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that because it's not
I
10.
miss I miss that a lot. I do miss that. Yeah, I haven't seen my eyes haven't been closed on the right side of 6:30 or 7 o'clock in a long time. It's been a while.
I can count on one hand the amount of times I've done that in the last year. But I turned 28 exactly a week from today. So
Let's go.
maybe this is the time when I become a real adult and actually wake up earlier.
Don't
I
do
don't
it.
think 9:30 is not that bad.
Billy Madison moment. Stay here as long as you can.
Cherish it. You
Don't you
gotta
ever
cherish
say
it.
that.
Oh, Billy Madison, one of
Ah,
the great movies. Brian, we need to talk about, but again, go to ouinsider.com if you want to know all the deets from the Board of Regents meeting. We need to talk about some softball stuff on this latest edition of the podcast because unbeknownst, you like that? Unbeknownst?
it's a good one. Words are getting
Unbeknownst.
better.
Do you like that little extra
Yeah,
I put
it's
at
a
the
good
end?
one.
We should talk about softball because unbeknownst to the avid listeners and OU Insider subscribers, we did actually have a podcast that was supposed to release earlier this week that was going to detail some portal buzz, specifically about NiJaree Canady, the softball Stanford standout, three S's. And we had a pod talking about all of that, but unfortunately, it has been lost to the black holes of history, dustbins of history. So we should go ahead and talk about NiJaree Canady because everybody knows at this point that NiJaree Canady, the arguably, I don't even know if it's arguable, the best pitcher in softball, or she was at very minimum the last best or the best pitcher in softball this past year because Jordy Ball was hurt. She's in the portal, Brian. I don't know if you knew that. Actually, I know that you knew that because you posted a note early Saturday to our VIP members over at ouinsider.com that you had heard buzz that she was going to enter the portal,
Mm.
and that the paperwork had already been handed in. It just hadn't been processed. I was able to corroborate that with a source and get some other details of all of that. So if you're a VIP member over at ouinsider.com, you already knew that. But before we talk about some other news with all of that, it has been a few days since she's entered the portal. We told people that it was going to be a slow burn, that this was not going to be a decision she makes tomorrow or today, that it was going to take some time. She was really going to weigh all of her options. Now that it's been a few days and the portal window officially closed a few days ago, 3 days ago, what has been, are you still, are you, or not still, are you surprised? Are you more intrigued, less intrigued? How are you feeling about Canady being in the portal after a few days?
I think it just kind of to reiterate, this process is going to be slow. I don't think her or anybody in her camp is really in a rush to get this done. I think the longer that time goes, the more desperate teams are probably going to get. And that bodes well, obviously, for her value. So there is no reason to rush right now. Season's a long way off. Um, and the part that was going to be a little more time sensitive has been done. That's her actually entering the portal. So, um, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, as we kind of said and hinted to, this is probably just a situation where you need to buckle up and just be patient and see kind of how the cards end up falling because OU is certainly in on her as a heavy contender for her uh, services going into next year. But they're not the only ones. I mean, there are several other teams that are going to throw everything they have at her. And I would imagine Stanford's on that list as well. So, I would say with everything that's happened in the last several days, or everything that we've heard, the buzz, the rumors, this, that, and the other, um, this is going to be like if there was a softball comparison in the transfer portal to like a top defensive tackle, like that's what this recruitment's going to be like. Um, there's just not a bigger name out there. There's not somebody that immediately NiJaree Canady almost, if you took a top 30 team in college softball and you threw NiJaree Canady on that team, she makes them a national title contender. Like that, if she has run support, they're going to be whoever she ends up, whatever colors she ends up wearing next year, they're going to be good. If they've got run support, if you can score 3 or more runs and Canada's pitching, there's a pretty good chance you're going to win that ball game. So, um, yeah, it's a big deal. It's going to be a slow burn. Uh, just feeling patient, man. Just have to be. That's kind of the way these things go, and it's going to be a roller coaster. Things like they always are, especially big names like Canady. So, just hang in there.
Well, and to that point, and we reported this at OU Insider, and we said it in that video that was lost that nobody will ever see. Um, I think the buzz was that there were 5 teams that would be in the mix for her at the top of the list, and it would probably be more like 2 or 3 teams that realistically have a shot at getting Canady. I think all those teams are in the SEC, and that would be really OU and Texas, with maybe Florida gets in the mix, maybe Tennessee gets in the mix. Yeah, to your point, look, OU is 100% absolutely in the mix. They, just like a bunch of other teams, have been preparing for this possibility because this was the talk of the World Series, even as Stanford was making a run to the semis,
Yeah.
that Canady was going to enter the portal. I do think that it's interesting that since she's entered the portal, I do think there's a couple of names that have really continued to emerge as true potential landing spots for her. Texas, I think the buzz is really there.
Yep.
And Stanford. Maybe she goes back to Stanford. And you mentioned that. Maybe she goes back to Stanford. That was, look, when she entered the portal, or not, sorry, not entered the portal. When there was buzz that she was going to enter the portal a year ago, I think there was this sentiment that, is it possible she, not threatening, but is it possible this is sort of a play to see if Stanford would roll out some money for her,
Yeah.
for NIL money? Again, I'm not confirming that. I'm not proving that. I'm not reporting that, but I think that sentiment was there. And I think that sentiment was kind of there too, even before she entered the portal this time around. I wouldn't rule out a return to Stanford. That's number one. Even with, it would surprise me, but that wouldn't shock me. And we talked about this the other day, we talked sort of about this the other day, but we didn't talk about this specifically. I think the thing, if you're Texas or Florida, the pitch that you can make to NiJaree Canady is come on board and we will be the immediate title favorite, like overwhelming title favorite. You look at Texas and all the players that they're bringing back. They were one of the youngest teams in the country.
Yep.
And they made the World Series final.
Yep.
And you can tell that there are teams smelling blood in the water a little bit, considering OU is losing a ton of really important players. So if NiJaree Canady joins Texas, they are the overwhelming favorite to win the title. If she joins Florida, considering Florida almost beat OU twice in the semis, and considering they have Rothrock coming back in the circle, who was a freshman and was awesome, they've already added another pitcher in the portal. Either one of those teams would be the overwhelming favorite. I think the difference is, so I think if you're OU, they would absolutely, OU, even with everything they're losing, is going to be a title contender and would be the favorite if she were to join them. But that path is not quite as clear or immediate as it is with Texas and Florida. So I think if you're OU, that's kind of what you're working against. And also, if you're OU, you need Canady more than Texas and Florida needs Canady.
Yep.
OU needs Canady. And we kind of talked about this the other day, but OU really needs Canady because
Desperate
otherwise,
for the
yeah,
first
desperate.
time. Yeah.
And we said, I mean, this is a time when this isn't, even when OU, and I said this, but even when OU added Kelly Maxwell, that was huge because they had lost Jordy Ball.
Yes.
But Kelly Maxwell, really what that did was fortify OU's roster. It wasn't really a desperation move. It was a maybe this is the missing piece type of thing, or not even. Actually, I don't even know if it was that. OU needs NiJaree Canady.
Yep.
Because otherwise, I don't know who is in the portal that I don't think there's one singular person in the portal that you can add and you think, oh, good, now we have NiJaree, or now our pitching staff is all good, because you're losing Nicole May and Kelly Maxwell. NiJaree Canady like fills every gap: experience, talent, youth. She's only going to be a junior.
Yeah.
She fills every gap. I don't think there's another player in the portal that can do that like Canady. I think you would probably need to add at least a couple of pitchers, and still then, if she goes to Texas or Florida, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle.
Right.
And I think that's the concern, right?
The other thing that she adds, like on top of everything that you just said, is if you land Canady and you're not able to land some of the top portal offensive players, like you're okay. You're going to be okay. It offsets what you're going to need on the offensive side of the ball to be competitive. Because at the end of the day, we've seen Canady throw 3 games in a row and be effective for 3 games in a row. Now you don't want to do that for anybody, but if you're able to land her, if Oklahoma swings and misses on a couple of big time offensive players in the portal, that kind of offsets those losses a little bit. And so when you're losing the amount of offensive production that Oklahoma is with the senior class that's leaving, there's just a lot of holes to fill. And landing one piece, there's just not a single, like you said, there's not a single piece out there that fills those gaps like Canady does. And that's like you said, Florida and Texas both have the necessity that they're returning a lot more production than Oklahoma is. And they stood toe to toe with Oklahoma in 2024. So, yeah, it's an odd spot. It's really a very interesting spot for Oklahoma to be in because we haven't seen it from this team before. At least not in the last 6 to 8 years. It's been Oklahoma is the favorite, and they're well ahead of everyone else. And it's kind of a foregone conclusion that they were going to be in Oklahoma City for the majority of those years, if not all of them. And now it's kind of like, what is Oklahoma going to do to replace that legendary class that just won 4 straight?
No, right. And I think we've always known this was going to be a pivotal offseason with how much OU was going to lose. And it helps when you've got Cassidy Pickering and Ella Parker, who showed they weren't just good for freshmen. They were two of the best players in softball last year.
Yeah.
That helps a lot. And it's not like you're returning nothing. You're returning Kirsten Deal and you're returning Sydney Sanders, and you got this really important incoming freshman class that is one of the best in the country. But when you look at that pitching staff specifically, it's Audrey Lowry in this 2024 class, this OU softball 2024 class. They're really excited about her. But again, it's how much do you want to put on her shoulders? Then you have Kirsten Deal, and Peyton Monticelli.
Yep.
That's who's currently on the roster.
Right.
And so if you don't get either Canady or at least a couple of very good pitchers in the portal, then pitching staff goes from maybe the strength of this team over the last several seasons to maybe the biggest glaring weakness.
Yeah.
I think that's the one concern. And two, in addition to everybody you're losing, I mean, we just learned before we started recording that Avery Hodge is headed to LSU.
Yeah.
And some in a move that didn't feel like it would have been that painful a month ago now feels kind of painful.
Yep.
Avery Hodge was going to be probably your starting second baseman, and she's gone.
And was incredibly clutch in Oklahoma City. Like, I mean, played a major role, not just offensively. I mean, she turned several double plays for the Sooners in clutch moments. Seemed like the ball just found its way towards her a lot on the infield, and outside of outside of one ball that I think had a bad hop and got into the outfield. I mean, she was lights out. Played really, really well. And you need somebody like that. The thing that also kind of compounds that loss is you can go out and potentially find a player that is comparable to her, but she was already familiar with the program. She was already familiar with what's going on. That it's not easy to replace somebody that's got experience in a program, that's come up in the program and is now going to be a major contributor. It's not easy to replace that because that's how you find leaders. That's how you build leadership and trust for a team. That's why this Oklahoma team has been so good for so long. There was so much trust. There was so much leadership. They really worked as a unit. And now for the first time in almost half a decade, you're going to have players like Sydney Sanders that are going to have to step up and be the leader of the group. You're going to have Kirsten Deal going to have to step up and be a leader of the group. Um, and it's just going to be difficult to have so much youth, talented youth, no question about it, talented youth, but uh, who are they going to look to? That's why, again, you fall back on a name like NiJaree Canady, who is just absolutely polarizing. It's no question. Landing somebody like that would be so big. But yeah, losing players like Hodge is that one's tough. The other ones you can almost say, well, those situations didn't really work out. SJ Guerin and Quincy Lilio, like you can say that, well, those kind of didn't work out. They were talented coming in, but they weren't really major contributors. Absolutely, Avery Hodge was about to be a major contributor for Oklahoma, and now there's a pretty good chance you're going to end up having to face her.
Just to again reiterate how important Canady coming to OU would be. She's led the country in ERA the last 2 years. This past year, 0.65 ERA, 337 strikeouts. Just absolutely nuts. She has 555 career strikeouts.
In 2 years.
Last year, opponents batted 147 against her. I mean, she's not just one of the best pitchers in softball. She's one of the best pitchers softball's ever seen.
Yeah, she's incredible.
That's how good she is.
I fully believe like that's a Kat Osterman, that's a Paige Parker, that's like I mean those big names, Jenny Finch, like we're talking about somebody that truly is going to transcend the sport, and will be a player that people remember. Like it also helps that she's as fiery as she is in the circle. But yeah, she's incredible. That's and what's crazy is we've seen all of these players in the past stick with one school and
Mm-hmm.
have that impact at one school, and now I mean, you're talking about a generational player skipping town and going somewhere else and playing for another team. It's just, I don't know, it's just crazy that we're in that era and somebody is about to absolutely land a championship piece. and it's just crazy to me. I still can't wrap my head around it. So
The last thing I'll say is a couple of things. One, I mentioned this a couple of days ago, but OU's really looking at someone like Kaylee Wyckoff from
yeah,
Texas Tech too, and I continue to be told that OU is firmly, absolutely in the mix for her. There's a couple of teams. I think Tennessee is in the mix for her too. Maybe a couple other teams that are kind of dark horse candidates. Um, you know, her camp has been really quiet. It's hard to get a ton of information out of them. I wouldn't expect that commitment to happen today or tomorrow.
yeah,
Should also mention, just like we said a few days ago, that I think there's going to be a lot of factors in Canady's commitment. There has been that buzz that she's homesick. Again, don't want to report that, don't want to confirm that.
hmm
That buzz is out there. She's from Topeka, which obviously is a little bit closer to OU. OU would have the advantage in that regard, not to mention the pedigree advantage, the history advantage. But there's a lot of factors at play. Ability to compete for a title, proximity, playing time, all that stuff is money. All that stuff is in effect. The last thing I would say, Brian, is don't OU fans don't get too horribly stunned if OU doesn't make a move, if Patty Gasso doesn't make a move tomorrow. I think this portal is going to carry out for weeks. I think there's a lot of dominoes that could fall for weeks. I think Canady's decision plays a huge part in that. And while OU has 5 transfer portal spots or transfer scholarships to offer, that sounds like a lot. It's not when you really think about how much OU is losing. And yeah, they're adding a bunch of freshmen, but when you consider how much OU is losing, 5 isn't a ton.
yeah,
And if you remember Kelly Maxwell, which that situation was different, but they didn't land Kelly Maxwell till early August
right,
last year. Stuff plays out. Stuff takes time. So, not everything is like Jordy Ball, who announced she was leaving 3 days after OU won the title and then was going to Nebraska a day later. Not everything's like that.
yeah.
So,
It's it'll be interesting to see kind of how all of it plays out because I don't think we've hit like the last wave of rumors with Canady. I think this thing's going to go all over the place. Wyckoff, obviously, as you mentioned, would be a big one. There are some other things out there there's some other names out there that I think Oklahoma is in on. I I'd be curious to see if any of the buzz around Abby Dayton is a real thing. Heard some things about her from a couple of different people. Um, Another name that I'm curious about and think Oklahoma might be in on is Sydney Stewart out of Washington, catcher there. So they're going to have to find somebody at that position that's a difference maker. They're losing arguably the best catcher in program history in Kinsey Hansen and Riley Ludlam there as well. So those are a couple other names, but yeah, I think Oklahoma's going to swing for the fences in the portal, and there's a lot of names out there that would certainly help. While 5 isn't a lot, I would argue that if you land the right 5, you put yourself right back in the driver's seat. So we'll see. I don't know. It's going to be.
well,
I wish there was more to talk about as far as like facts, but right now there's a lot of rumors, speculation, wondering, and the only thing that's going to help us figure all that stuff out is just time, linear time.
no, absolutely. And I think there's going to be more to talk about in the coming weeks. But Brian, before we get into our very last segment here, I want to tell you about something. Did you know that it's smooth sack summer? Did you know that?
Yeah, it is.
Well, Brian, I want to tell all the ladies and gentlemen out there that it's my pleasure to announce that smooth sack summer, it's officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code OUinsider. That is, get free shipping and 20% off when you go to manscaped.com and use code OUinsider. Summertime and the trimming is easy. Brian, we're going to do something real quick to wrap this one up, to wrap this pod up. Anybody at OUinsider.com has likely noticed that we have started our schedule series
Let's go.
For OU football, where we rank each opponent OU has on the 2024 schedule based on a variety of very specific, it's a scientific list. It's very, very detail oriented. It's a lot, very experiment based, but those factors include significance, difficulty, and entertainment value. And the first one on that list was the Temple game. Brian, OU plays Temple, the Temple Owls, the first game of the season, August 31st, a Friday game, Friday to open the season at Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. It is OU's first game as an SEC member. And while I made this argument when I wrote that piece, Brian, and I don't think there's a ton to talk about here, but when I wrote that piece, the Temple piece for OU Insider, I argued that while I think Maine is almost certainly the easiest opponent OU will face, that game is going to feel very SEC specific because it's essentially a no-name opponent that's coming in November.
They
That's
get
like the most,
paid seven
yeah.
figures to, yeah.
That's like the most SEC thing ever is to
Right.
play a no-name opponent in November at home.
It's cupcake time, baby.
Well, and also when you get into November, the stakes just naturally feel
Right.
a little bit higher, you know. So this isn't a slight to Temple. I think Temple's going to be better than Maine, who plays in the Coastal Athletic Association Conference, the CAA. I think
The CAAC.
the CAAC, something like that. I just think, and this game is going to feel significant because it's being played on a Friday night. It's the first Friday night kick for OU in school history. Obviously, first game as an SEC member. That's going to be rad. But Brian, the Owls since 2020 are 10-33 overall. They went 3-9 last year. Their last winning season came in 2019. And also that game, I apologize. It's not August 31st. It's August 30th. August 31st is Saturday. It's August 30th. It's 6:00. Brian, is there anything? I mean, I went through here, and I think with the other games, we can really dive deeper into stuff that we can't cover in written form. But when it comes to this Temple team, I mean, they're losing their starting quarterback, their starting running back. I mean, they returned some guys, but like, I don't know. Anything stand out to you about this matchup?
SMU beat this team 55-0 last year.
Ooh, I didn't even realize that.
So Tulsa beat them 48-26. It's things they're relative. It doesn't always work like that. Just because those things happened last year doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen this year. Look, if if Oklahoma is anything close to what we expect them to be, if the trajectory continues to be upward for this team, which I fully expect going into year three, there's just not a lot of intrigue for this game as far as the competitive aspect of it goes. I mean, OU should win this game going away. This should be this outside of that main game. Well, even, I'll even say this should be the most lopsided game score wise probably of the season, because I think against Maine you could see a lot of guys sitting just for what part of the season it's in. as you kind of mentioned with the stakes. And if Oklahoma rolls into that main game with only, you know, two or less losses, or maybe, better than that, there's probably not a lot of starters that are going to see some time in that game. And so this one should be pretty lopsided. I am incredibly excited about uh, this being a Friday night game. I just think that that's one, the fact that it's the first Friday night game in OU history is just crazy to me. I cannot believe that that's the truth. Home game, Friday night home game. Um, the one thing that does make me nervous, and this is just from a personal perspective, is I have a kid due 5 days before this game.
Oh,
And so that we've already worked it out to have some people here to help at the house, but there is no way I am staying overnight in Norman, regardless of how late that game ends. So I may very well be getting back to Collinsville, America at 4 a.m. sharp, and be taking a bottle and sending my wife to bed and seeing what I can do to help. So that part of it, I'm nervous about. As far as the game goes, I'm excited. Like I think it's going to be electric. First game in the SEC, ESPN's going to be there in coverage. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere. I'm excited about it. Um, Not really much more to say about it.
no, and you mentioned Friday night ESPN. Um, Heck of an introduction into the SEC. I agree with you. I think your second child coming is probably more compelling than anything that's going to happen in this game. Just to throw some more stats out there, in addition to them going 3-9 last year, they averaged 21 points a game, 109th nationally. That's where that ranked. They gave up 35.7 points per game, 127th nationally. And there's just not really any reason to believe they're going to be much better this year. So the good news for OU, and while I'm usually a huge proponent of strong non-conference schedules, I love when teams are willing to take risks in our non-conference. I think for OU, that's okay this year because their conference schedule is one of the toughest in the country, bar none. And, I think to be able to ease in, not to overlook any opponent, that's not what I'm trying to say, but um, that main game is only really interesting because it's happening in November, and the three games to end the season after that are Missouri, Alabama, and LSU.
Mm,
So, that's a hell of a 3-game run to end the season.
two of those are on the road.
Yep. So this just feels like hey, let's see what Jackson Arnold's got, and if you got a big enough lead at halftime,
Yep.
let's see what these younger guys can do. That's kind of what this feels like. We will have bigger, very much more detailed breakdowns when we do the other games, but this one I just don't know.
There's a reason it was first on your list.
I'm really more excited about going to Temple in 2025 because that means we get to go to Philly.
Philly, yeah.
Get to go to
My
Philly.
my father, whenever he was in the Navy, was stationed in Philly. Of course, this was back in the '80s, late '80s, early '90s, and he doesn't. I don't think he realizes I'm going to Philly in a couple of years, but he is. He's always told the story about being mugged there and how he learned to keep his money in his shoe. So that will be something that I will make sure and debrief the group on before, or brief the group on before we head up there. But yeah, no, going to Philly is going to be cool. I'm excited about it.
Well, you ruined my excitement about going to Philly. Thanks, Brian.
I
First, I
would
can't talk.
imagine you, of all people, would be like hating the fact that we have to go to Philly.
Why? I love Philly. I've never actually been to Philly. I love It's
Well,
Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's a great show.
well, yeah, not that part. I wasn't. I was more alluding to the fact that um, you probably have a star tattooed on you somewhere for your love with the Dallas Cowboys. And
Oh, I wasn't.
hey, you're in off season mode, so I'll let it slide. But
Oh, well, yeah, I'm gonna have to boo every Eagles fan that I see. I mean, sure.
I would not
And
suggest that.
I'm gonna boo them. I'm ready to get in fights. Oh, 100%. I'm ready. I'm a part of Jerry Jones's army, baby.
There you
Let's
go.
let's go to war.
Please wear your jersey out in public. We
You
could
joke,
make
but
that's a
oh,
no, that's an entire pod right there. Like we could absolutely make something of
let's
that.
let's go.
Content
Let's get the,
ideas, writing it
yep.
down.
I was about to say, let's get there a day early, and that's what we'll do with our day early is we'll go around town. I'll wear my Dallas jersey, and we'll vlog it. We'll video it. We'll see how many people sucker punch me.
That
It'd be
sounds
kind of
good.
fun. It would be kind of fun. Brian, that's going to do it for us here because if we run any longer, I'm probably going to run the risk of talking more badly than I already have. But that's going to do it for us here. Next week, we're going to not only do another edition of the schedule series, but we're going to start looking at position groups ahead of fall camp, which is here in just a few weeks. Not to mention, we'll be that much closer to OU joining the SEC. So, and we'll also talk about any potential softball portal news. It'll be a jam-packed episode next week. In the meantime, make sure to head over to OUinsider.com, become a VIP subscriber. Make sure to like and subscribe here at this OU Insider YouTube channel. You're not going to want to miss all of the content that we have to come in the coming weeks. Until then, this has been the Oklahoma Drill. We'll see you next time.